family comes second. Well, that may be fine when you're a bachelor, but as life goes on, you get married with kids, and you've got to make your decisions. Are you all Navy? And that cost me 2 wives. Or are you a part-time Navy with a goal of spending your 20 years and retiring, and hopefully you'll retire as a lieutenant commander or a commander. But if you're a hard charger and your goal is to be an admiral, now you'll take all the hard billets and off to sea you'll go. And as soon as your sea tour is over, you'll make another choice. What command is you're going to go to where you're going to be in the next higher billet, and you're going to be tasked with a harder job, with more people, or new airplanes and so forth, or new ships. So you can make what you want out of the Navy. The Navy will give you every opportunity to advance. They'll also make sure that you're aware that every opportunity where you screw up, when you take a job and it's above and beyond your ability, or you like liquor too much, or you like to spend late nights carousing, and less time having to deploy and everything, that's your decision. You put your family or your love life or your Navy career, and you decide what you want to do. Sometime when they have a shortage, you have no decision. And you'll have to live with it. Sometimes you get in a command that you don't see eye to eye with the CO or with your department head, and you can risk your career because the guy that's over you makes out the recommended fitness report to the CO, and if you're in a large command, the CO will know you, will know your name, but may not be aware of all of the functions that you're in charge of and what you're doing. It is the department head that you're working for that has to make the recommendations to the CO as to what your value is. So there again, sometimes you're not happy in that command, but you bite the bullet, you put your all into it, and it pays off in the long run. I used to preach to the young sailors, even if you didn't like the Navy, you don't sit around and badmouth it, because your petty officers that are career, the chief that you're working for, when he hears you bad-mouthing and he has to send somebody to a primary school for special training, or he has to send somebody on a good deal, who is he going to pick? The guy that's bad-mouthing the Navy and doesn't like it? Or is he going to pick the guy that says, gung-ho, put me in, chief? It's the same with an officer. You got to be gung-ho, and you've got to say, put me in, boss. So you make your career what you want to. Now, I mentioned the various organizations. The O level, we inherited this type of organization and everything when they created the United States Air Force. And they set it up. Organizational levels are an individual ship or an individual squadron. They all have a commanding officer. As a limited duty officer, Mustang, you can be in charge of one of those functions as the officer in charge, but you cannot be the commanding officer. You always have somebody else that's over you because of the limitation on judicial punishment and the possibility that you might have hard feelings for somebody that you had to work for, and now you're a senior to them. So it is set up to be fair and square. In my case, as an LDO with a mandatory retirement at 30 years, or I could have retired as a lieutenant at 20 years. I elected to stay in the Navy and progress, and each step of the way I became, at the 29th year, I asked what my options was. I was facing a mandatory retirement as a lieutenant commander, and I was given the opportunity to change my designator, which technically, when I changed my designator, I had to be picked up by my peers as a lieutenant commander and join the guys that were regular Navy from day one, not previous enlisted. And they were quite a bit younger, quite a bit more educated, and had degrees to get where they were. And now you were plugged in to competition with them. But you had an advantage. If you had some department head tours and you had some of the hard billets at sea and you elected to be in the combat squadrons and made many deployments, that gave you a lot of points and a lot of weight when the promotion board came up. That group had to accept you into that group to recreate. They discharged you as a LDO, and you got a new designator, and then you could become, they whitewashed all of your previous career, and you could become a commanding officer with judicial punishment and everything else. So it's all up to you, and I was fortunate to have a lot of backing by the previous COs and 7 different admirals that had been my commanding officers and worked their ways up, and I gave me letters of commendation and special letters of my achievements, and that got me in my 30th year to pass the gate, and I could have gone to 41 years. But now I am in competition with the guys that are half my age and all have engineering degrees of some type, and I have to again outshine them to get promoted. So again, I have to make my choices. Do I go back to sea? Do I take a hard job? Do I risk being overloaded and not have the ability to handle that harder job? Well, I figured in my personal life I proved myself up to that point, so press on. I was fortunate enough at that time to meet my third wife, and we were married for 41 years, and we were still on our honeymoon. And it was wonderful. But it cost me my 2 previous wives. They gave me an option, Navy or them. And I had to select to stay in the Navy, and that was the end of our marriage. So when you change your designator from limited duty officer to a specialized and starts your career over as an officer, There's pros and cons. You can overload yourself, and you still have to compete with higher educated men with the same jobs that you've had, and you have to prove to them that you are better than they are. The transition from enlisted to warrant to LDO to full officer status, in my case, being married and happily married and having been to sea many times, my last assignment right after I got married to my third wife was the USS New Orleans, and I had to leave her and go up to rehab the ship up in Bremerton for a year while she had her job and took care of the family and kids in San Diego. And then I had to go back to sea and go to Korea. So you make your choice. She understood when I got married to her that I was career Navy, and she was willing to put up with the different deployments away. We were also fortunate in her business and job. She was able to get away. Anytime I was in port overseas somewhere, she was able to come and join me for short periods of time. So she got to go to the Philippines, she got to go to Japan, and she got to go to Atsuki, Japan, and she got to tour Europe. So there are pros and cons and benefits to be in the Navy. You get to see the world. You get to live in various countries. In my case, I got to exotic ports. I spent time in Singapore. I spent R&R numerous times in Hong Kong and in Taiwan and in Taipei. And I spent time climbing Mount Fuji and climbing the Tokyo Tower and going to places like Hakone and touring all over Japanese cities, touring all over the Philippines. And I got a wonderful 2-year tour on Guam, which will be one of my next episodes to talk about the diving and the life in Guam for 2 years.